As you continue to enjoy your lunch, I want to recognize some important elected officials who are with us today. Of course, we have our 4 members of Congress here in the room with us at lunch. Our 3 from the great state of Texas. Congressman Tony Gonzales, thanks for being here today, sir. Congressman August Pfluger, thank you, sir, for being here. Congresswoman Beth Van Duyne, thank you. There you are. Good to see you, Beth. And joining us virtually from California in a little while is Congresswoman Michelle Steele. I just have a couple of comments, a couple of other introductions. We'll watch a video, but I want to say, because I won't have the opportunity to introduce him, and he really is deserving of one, the gentleman and colleague who will be moderating this great discussion with these new members of Congress is former California Assemblyman and great TPPF colleague Chuck DeVore. There you are. Should also introduce our legislators who are here. Of course, we've seen Dr. Brad Buckley from Texas House District 54 northwest of Austin. Also, Representative Sean Thierry. There you are. I hadn't seen you, but welcome. Thank you. So good to have you with us. And member of the Senate who's been here for most or all of the conference because he loves to learn, Senator Bob Hall. Thanks, Bob. And you know, one of the takeaways from this conference ought to be, and I'll just mention this briefly at the end after our conversation, is to focus even more, and nothing against our congressmen or legislators, on local candidates, local races, local issues. It's really important. And we have a newly elected conservative Austin City Councilwoman Mackenzie Kelly with us today. Would you please stand, ma'am? Thank you. So for you praying types, put her at the top of the list. And of course, she's going to be great. I will say, in all seriousness, a lot of the policies, perhaps even most of the policies of the city government of Austin are really worthy of derision. They really are that bad. And yet, it doesn't mean that it's hopeless. It's not hopeless. This remains a great city with great people. Whether they're left of center or right of center, we need great people in policy-making positions, as Ms. Kelly has decided to do and won, to be able to change that course. And so we think that this is a new spring in the greatest capital, in the greatest state, in the greatest country in the history of the world. So thank you very much. And I will say, because I know I've got some Democrat friends here in the office, in the audience, maybe even in the office, that's not a partisan comment. It's a philosophical one where we can agree that we want our cities to be well run, and it is fair to say that Austin probably could improve in that regard. So thank you. I don't know if you've spent any time outside in downtown Austin this week. I have. I do nearly every workday, and I can tell you, especially from having lived here in the 90s when it was just very different, that unfortunately it continues to get worse. I think all of us across the political spectrum would agree with that. The Austin City Council continues to flirt with and implement this ridiculous policy of diminishing funding for the police force. That should not be a partisan issue. It's an issue that goes straight to the heart of public safety. That is something that all of us who've worked on conservative criminal justice reform have done. Those of us who are not necessarily conservative Republicans who work on criminal justice reform agree with that statement as well. And so TPPF's job is to step through that partisanship, to step through that politicization of that issue and get back to the questions of public safety. And it starts with telling the truth about police reform. So in that spirit, please enjoy the following video.
I am a former police officer, former director of a police academy, and I came to TPPF to focus exclusively on policing research. The Texas Public Policy Foundation looks at policing as a core function of government. We believe in limited government, but policing is one of those core functions that we have to have. These calls to defund the police are part of the delegitimizing of the law enforcement institution. That's a dangerous path, even with the best of intentions. Without the ability to use force, there is no authority. We lose the rule of law. We no longer have law and order in our society at all. When you defund, when you reduce budgets, the first area that has to go is training. The training expense comes from the personnel. If I take 10 police officers off the street to train them for 8 hours, I need to replace at least part of those 10 with other officers on overtime. And when you talk about cutting budgets, that's gone. That's the first place that has to be trimmed. If we're looking to improve policing, defunding is not the answer. Abolition is absolutely not the answer. The way to do that is through training. A confident officer has a stronger sense of security when dealing with the public, meaning that their likelihood of using force unnecessarily is diminished. Protests, rioting, all of those things have all been the result of police actions, right? Use of force actions. Once training is improved and we have more skilled officers who go through the police academy and then have in-service training throughout their careers to maintain those skills, you have expanded their ability to make good use of force decisions so that we don't see some of the tragic incidents where officers either overreact or in some cases even underreact during a situation. We feel that this is the most effective area to improve law enforcement and policing capabilities, as well as the relationship between the police and their communities. The men and women that join law enforcement do so at great sacrifice to themselves and their families, and they do it out of a goodness. They are there as part of your community, but also part of your government, there to help you, there to protect you. Getting that message across is so important, especially now when our country needs good men and women to join the profession.
If I could be joined on the stage by our newly elected members of Congress, that would be wonderful. I'm Chuck DeVore. I'm the Vice President of National Initiatives with the Texas Public Policy Foundation, and we're going to hear from 4 wonderful freshman lawmakers, people who now have the chance to change American history in this amazing and fraught time in which we live. And we're going to ask them some interesting questions. And for many of you, both here in person and live, this may be the first time you've ever heard from any of them. And I want to assure, let our audience know as well as our participants that we have had an unprecedented number of people watching online. I think one of our events has had over 7,000 people watching live. So to our in-person audience and to our live stream audience, welcome. Let's get going. So, 3 of the 4 of you weren't supposed to be here. If you listen to the pundits, this was supposed to be a wipeout year for Republicans running for office from the top to the bottom. So I'll put it first to you, Representative Van Duyne. Why are you here? How did you get elected? You defied expectations. What's going on?
I think what you've seen across the country was, and by the way, I want to give a lot of respect to that video that we just saw. What you saw over and over across the country, especially this last summer, was fights to defund the police. And I think what you saw from Republicans who ran this last cycle is, we recognize law and order. We recognize the importance for business. We recognize that we need to open our economy back up. And we all fought for that. We were very involved in our community. I was mayor of the city of Irving for 6 years. I was on the city council for 6 years. I worked under the Trump administration under Secretary Ben Carson, for 2.5 years. We worked in our communities. We talked to small business owners. We talked to working families. And we connected with them because what we saw overwhelmingly was a government of intrusion, a government that could continue to try to take over every aspect and control their life. And what you saw from Republicans was fighting for working families, fighting to allow more opportunities, more options, and more individual freedoms. And the Democrats have gotten so far to the left that this last election, I think people really started recognizing the fact that we cannot continue in the path that we've been going.
Wow. So joining us remotely is someone that I've known for decades, Representative Michelle Steele in Southern California represents an area, I think some of it overlaps the area I used to represent in the state assembly. And this was a pickup. This was a seat that for 2 years was held by the Democrats. They knocked off an incumbent Republican that I also had known for quite some time. And many people expected that these seats were gone forever. And so, Michelle, Representative Steele, how did you win? What happened there in Orange County? And great to see you.
Nice seeing you. It's been years. It was really interesting because when this seat opened up and, I was actually asked to run, and I was looking at that during the pandemic, and was chair of the Orange County, Board of Supervisors. It's 3.2 million people. And Beth just said that, my opponent just went joining the protesters to dismantling and defunding police officers. And I'm the one actually declared police enforcement appreciation day. Plus that, I was the one actually started that business ad hoc committee, and end of May last year that we started asking all the businesses open with the guidelines so they can open safely. And our governor actually retaliated and he closed down our Orange County beautiful beaches, and he's the one actually shut down all the businesses. So you know what, I just stick to the issues because people were suffering so much. So I just try to be pro businesses, try to help them, and public safety comes first for the residents. So I was working with the police officers and sheriff's departments, and I think they really did it.
Excellent, thank you. Well, Representative Gonzales, as much as it pains me to say this, you are a veteran of the U.S. Navy. I'm going to have to do some push-ups to, just to kind of cleanse the stage, afterwards. And then sitting next to you, we have someone from the U.S. Air Force. I mean, this is killing me. If we had someone from the Marine Corps, the Coast Guard here, that'd be it. Yeah, see, listen, typical Marine, right? They always have to pipe up when no one asks them to speak up. So you were not supposed to be here, right? I mean, your district was one of the most hard-fought districts in the country.
Right.
Why are you here? How did that happen?
Yeah, first off, don't listen to pundits. Second off, you just got to work hard, and I've worked hard my entire adult life. And look, this district, Will Hurd held this seat 3 cycles by working hard. Last cycle, he won by 900 votes. We put 70,000 miles on my pickup truck, and we won by 12,000 votes. And to answer your question, we did that by just showing up, right? We didn't change the message, right? We leaned into our religious beliefs. We leaned into our belief in free enterprise and limited government, our support of national security and our first responders, but we showed up. My district is over 70% Hispanic, and I'd argue a lot of Hispanics have been forgotten by the Republican Party. And part of my strategy was to go to places traditional Republicans had never gone before and fight for those votes. Change nothing in the message, but show up over and over and over again.
That's great. So, Representative Pfluger, and this is really, for those of you who are probably suspecting this, yes, he is a descendant of the namesake of nearby Pflugerville. And if it weren't for the fact that Pflugerville is nearby, I probably would find it impossible to say your name correctly the first time out. But welcome, and so you had a different sort of perspective, right? So your district wasn't as competitive, but that kind of allowed you to almost have a global view, I suppose appropriate because you're a fighter pilot and you're used to being up there at 40,000 feet or higher. So what were you seeing from your vantage point as you were running for office?
Well, I think it's been said already that we have a winning message. And when you look at the 43 new Republican freshmen that are in this 117th Congress, the message was that we believe in our rights and our liberties. The message was that we believe in a limited government. And the message is that our conservative values have allowed our economy to be strong. They've allowed our national defense to be strong. They've allowed our country to grow in ways that, we did not see under the Obama administration. And that message got us to the point where folks all over the country, the 14 seats that we were able to pick up, were reaching people that, like Tony just mentioned, that it's the same message. People just heard it and they said, yes, I believe in that. And that is something that I want to be a part of because I know it's the right thing. And I mean, we have an incredible class. We have people who in Miami and Miami-Dade County literally escaped the Cuban tyranny of communism and socialism. And they will not go back to that. And their voters that are there are waking up to the fact that this move to the left is dragging our country down, and they're not going to stand for it.
All right. So, Representative Van Duyne, you've been a member of Congress for almost 2 weeks, right? What is your priority in your very first session in the U.S. Congress? What are you going to work on most?
If you had asked me that question a year ago, it would have been a different answer. We have to be flexible and make sure that we're being reflective of the time. Right now, I think we need to work on voter integrity, voter security. People right now don't believe that their vote counts. One person, one vote is not what we've been seeing. We have taken, and by the way, it's only been 2 weeks. Because I'll tell you, this has been the longest 2 weeks of my life. Third day that we're in lockdown, barricaded in our offices, watching what everybody was watching across the country. It was unreal. But that is not going to intimidate any of us up on the stage, or quite honestly, intimidate a lot of the Republicans that you see in office from changing a vote because we thought we did what was right, which was standing up for the integrity of our Constitution and our entire bedrock of democracy. So I currently am working on a bill right now that will help states actually enforce their voter laws. We have to be able to do that. But then there's also things like opening up the economy, right? Getting jobs back open to make sure all of these planned policies and projects that we're somehow going to pay for, and yet we're going to cut off our economy to be able to actually make any money to be able to pay for them. So we're working on that. And then healthcare. Those are the meat and potato issues that helped all of us get elected, that we all fought for, that for the last 2 weeks, we have somehow, brand new session, haven't dealt with any of that. It's been political theater. We've seen it for the last 4 years. And you've got folks up on this stage right now that I know are not going to be able to put up with it.
Thank you. Representative Steele, so you have been recently an Orange County supervisor, and you've been around partisan politics a long time. You have a lot of experience insofar as understanding, what's possible and perhaps a little less possible. What are your goals? What are your objectives for your very first session of Congress?
You know what, actually I ran because I want to make sure that, we have to meet the budget and we're gonna, lower the taxes and small businesses. But since last year, since pandemic, that American government is not gonna be the savior. I think our American people has to go to work, and they're the one going to work every morning and get back to some kind of normalcy. That's really, really important, because right now that we are giving us CARES Act money, and CARES Act money is really not helping stimulating economy. Actually, that's going to add to more of the federal debt. So we really have to looking at the numbers, that how we're going to make sure that working with the other colleagues, that stimulus language that we have to watch out, and my colleagues find with working with our colleagues that, we have to find the final solution, because any money that, we are giving out, if it helps, it's going to be great. But if it goes to just future debt that our kids and our grandkids have to pay for, that's not going to work. So I'm going to go straight into open up the businesses and make sure that people right now struggling, they have to get out of those struggle and go back to the normal life.
Thank you for that. So turning once again to the U.S. Navy, What are your objectives in your very first year, or session, actually 2 years, right, in the U.S. Congress?
Yeah, I served 20 years in the military. I served in Iraq, I served in Afghanistan, very similar to August and a lot of other members that are in our class. We love this country. And right now, the country is torn apart. So the very first thing I want to do is help calm the waters and bring people together. It's okay to be different. It's okay to have different ideas. I think that's one thing that makes America so strong. So that's the first thing, is just bring us back together. The second thing is dig in on our conservative values, because a fight is coming, right? Push back against this Green New Deal that's on the horizon. Push back against this Medicare for all that's on the horizon. Push back against open borders that's on the horizon. I think there's a way to do that. I think there's a way to do that in a civil manner. You can be firm in your values and still work with others to get things done.
Excellent, thank you. Representative Pfluger, you've had now a few minutes to think about. I'm sure you've had more than just a few minutes, but what are you aiming to do in your first couple of years in the U.S. Congress?
Well, as you can tell on the panel, we have excellent ideas. I'd like to echo, especially the election integrity, and have already signed on as a co-sponsor to make sure that when we have the accountability, and I think the state of Texas has done a really nice job. You can look at the state of Florida. 20 years ago, they got a black eye with their election process. They have gotten to the point where it's trusted, and we need to make sure that at the state level, the hard work needs to be done there. But there's a lot of folks here who are in the oil and gas industry that are in this room and watching online. And when I think about national security and I think about what it means for us to not be dependent upon other countries for our energy sources, this is a lever of national security that is so critically important to us. In a market-based, free market society, the ideas and the innovation that we have seen over the last 10 years have gotten us to the point where this country is the #1 producer of oil and gas in the entire world. And all of us want an earth that is sustainable. That is not a question. But what is under attack, and the rhetoric that we hear from the Biden-Harris administration that's incoming, suggests that they want to kill that industry, and I'm not okay with that. And so last week, we introduced a piece of legislation that we understand they are going to come after federal lands like the Obama administration did in 2016. And so we are seeking to prevent them from doing that, and will continue in a very sustained and strategic effort to make sure that this instrument of national security can be preserved and sustained, that helps our economy, and that has quite honestly lifted 1 billion people out of poverty in the last 10 years.
So, Congressman Pfluger, could you expand on that a bit? You talked initially, as did Representative Van Duyne, about voter integrity, election integrity. My understanding is the House under Speaker Pelosi has reintroduced House Resolution 1 that was introduced in 2019 that is a veritable Christmas tree of ideas, of things that are not only usurping state and local government's ability to run clean and fair elections, but essentially trying to use national legislation to perhaps cement in a generational advantage for one party over the other. Things like eliminating the ability to maintain voter lists, eliminating voter ID, for example, requiring prepaid postage for mail-in ballots. Could you go in a little more detail about H.R. 1 and what does that mean for the ability of this nation to run free and fair elections?
Well, absolutely, and I'm going to go a step before that. The very first action that happened on the House floor in the 117th Congress was a prayer that ended in Amen and All Woman. And we knew at that moment in time that we were in trouble because, that's just ludicrous. And then we get to H.R. 1. And, the most important aspect right here is that the Electoral College must be kept sacred and that we must allow states to run the elections per the Constitution. But there has to be some sort of baseline trust and integrity in this system. And it's not the federal government running it and doing exactly what you said, but there are many proposals out there that would include ideas like a national database or registration that includes an identification to be shown or signature verification. And these things are healthy and they're good and they don't impinge upon the rights of the states, and the state of Texas and other states, to run their elections, but it sets a baseline so that we can still adhere to the 10th Amendment while having trust and confidence in the system.
Representative Van Duyne, you also mentioned election integrity in your remarks. Do you have any further thoughts about H.R. 1 and the danger that that poses to our form of governance?
You know, you think about what's happening in California and how they're having, children voting, and how, folks who are not in this country legally voting in their local elections. I don't want D.C. to define how Texas conducts its elections. You can clap at that. But the same token, just as Congressman Pfluger was mentioning, we do have to have standards. I think we can put federal grants up and say if you are looking at a federal grant, you have to clean up your voter rolls every 2 years so that we're not sending mail-out ballots to people who have been dead, who have moved. We're not sending mail-out ballots to people who have 3 different addresses. So you're required to clean those up. But you also want to have a trail that you can audit. Now, whether or not that is by blockchain apps or whether or not that's actually having a physical ballot where people can look at, but you have to make sure that people have that trust that their vote is going to count. Otherwise, we will never see another election run cleanly, and you're going to see more people not voting.
So Representative Gonzales and Representative Steele, you both represent districts where mail-in balloting has been kind of a persistent controversy, or there's been concerns about its abuse. Do you want to expand on your own thoughts on H.R. 1 or ways that we need to be on guard about election integrity?
Yeah, look, absolutely. People are upset, and they're upset for a reason, and it's not going to go away unless we address it, right? Regardless of who's in the White House. This is a systemic issue that we absolutely must address going forward, not only for the integrity of this election, but every election going forward. We need to have every American believe in the system, right? And we should all, elected officials, take an inward look and go, how can I best help this? And it happens at the federal level, it happens at the state level, and it especially happens at the local level. So what I would like to do is empower those at the local level to do the things that they need to do. If we're asking Washington to solve some of these issues, it's not going to work. It has to happen. We have to empower those at the local level. But I want to be clear. If we undermine our own elections, that hurts all of us. And that is the most dangerous thing to our republic. We have to take this moment and we have to drill down and we have to go, how do we heal? How do we get this right?
So Representative Steele, you certainly had a front row seat to this. In California, as some of you in the audience know, in 2016 and 17, the legislature passed legislation that basically made it legal to do ballot harvesting and to pay people to do it. And ironically, the same time, Texas passed legislation essentially implementing California's old laws where you couldn't get paid to ballot harvest and you had to be a relative to be able to take control of the ballot. And so, Representative Steele, I know that one of the things that happened in your area is that the Republican Party went ahead and put out drop boxes, lock boxes for ballots in front of big churches and gun stores and things like that. I understand that the Attorney General actually tried to sue to stop that and lost the lawsuit, right?
And then that Attorney General lost. It was really interesting because Democrat legislator introduced the bill and Democrat governors signed it. So when they are doing it, it's legal, and Republicans are doing it and it's illegal. We have to go back to the basic. We used to, you remember that, you vote on election day and you counted everything on the same day. You didn't have to wait for 2-3 months to come out the next result. But you know what, in California, we have to change so many things from the beginning of ballot harvesting. You go to skilled nursing care. how these people can vote, and you know what, suddenly you get all these ballots without voters ID, that you know what, they don't even check the ID, and you know, they don't even check the signatures, especially these days with the computers. As long as it's not one line, they okay it. So you know what, everything has to be really cleaned up. And then list two, and some of the 108-year-old that, you know, who is voting, yes, if that person is alive, that's really great. How about apartment buildings? They have only 3-story apartment building, but there's addresses on 4th story. I mean, you know what, we really have to clean up those lists. And we have to start from the beginning, that, you know what went wrong? Because I know that we used to vote on the same day and we used to count it. Now we don't count on the same day and we have to resolve for 2 months. We have to change everything back to where we used to be.
Representative Gonzales, you mentioned the border and your concern about a potential crisis on the border, and all 4 of you, of course, are from the 2 largest and most important border states. What do you think is the likelihood of a new humanitarian crisis occurring on our southern border, as the Biden administration, the incoming Biden administration, has made clear that they intend to dismantle quite a bit of the Trump administration's legacy in this regard?
Yeah, you know, my district has over 800 miles of Texas and Mexico border. And just yesterday, I was in Del Rio, Texas, and I was having conversations with the sector chief of the Border Patrol agent, sheriffs, and police department, right? Tackling this discussion. And this is what is happening. They're seeing an increase in more activity. They expect an even larger increase in activity. And there is a lot of issues that we have to tackle in the 117th Congress. My first piece of legislation will be to strengthen border security, and particularly the Stone Garden program that allows these interagencies to come together to tackle those issues. And there's a lot of things that need to happen. Increased technology is a big part of that. Simple communications adds to that. But look, it's on the horizon. It's an issue that's certainly not going away anytime soon. And I believe as conservatives, we have to lean into it. We have to get ahead of the storm, not wait for the Biden administration to come down with far left-leaning policies.
So, Colonel, if I may address you as such, you obviously can look at this, as both of you can, from a national security aspect. What are some of the national security things that keep you up at night regarding a more porous border?
Well, I think what Tony just mentioned is first and foremost something that the last 4 years we've seen a concerted effort to make sure that we are secure. And the video that we showed before lunch on how important it is to have law enforcement that are supported by our local governments that Governor Abbott mentioned yesterday, it's the same thing when we look at ICE, Border Patrol, Customs, these folks that are putting their lives on the line every single day. And I think in this age, in 2020, 2021, with the amount of travel that people can do, you know, the enemy is global. We look at China as a threat. And they're not so stupid to think that they couldn't put somebody through the border when they want to, and to hit the vulnerabilities that we have. And this is a critical vulnerability. In military parlance, this is a critical vulnerability that needs to be enforced. The technology, the funding for the training, all of these things come together in a way that the last 4 years we have had a concerted effort on it. We cannot lose that momentum, and I fear that that is going to be one of the priorities.
Representative Van Duyne, on this issue, of course, when a problem starts to become addressed, it often recedes in the mind of the voting public.
Yeah.
What of your constituents, when you were running and you were engaging in this intense contact with people who might vote for you or not, how often did you hear about this issue, and what was the sort of concern that was expressed by people?
Well, I'll tell you, I mean, I have been involved in this. I got elected to city council, you know, back in 2004, and we dealt with this on the city. We actually had a very strong relationship with our federal law enforcement officers, and we got a lot of pressure not to do that from outside. You know, CNN came in and did reports, and New York Times came in. We held strong. And that partnership actually resulted, we went after criminal illegal aliens. And at one point in time, the city of Irving had more criminal illegal aliens deported than any other city in the country per capita. And we were told that was, we were going to be racist, people weren't going to want to move there, businesses were going to move out. Guess what? We had the lowest crime rate in our city's history that lasted for 9 years. We became the 5th safest city in the country. It was also the fastest growth period that we had. People were coming from all over the world to live there. It was the fastest economic period that we had because businesses wanted to live in safe cities. So I think you see people being intimidated, especially elected officials being intimidated, but at the end of the day, people want to live in safe cities. And the idea of a sanctuary city and what you've seen are destroying places like Austin, are destroying places like San Francisco. And if their elected officials would get a little bit of backbone, find out more, you don't want drug cartels in your city. You don't want human trafficking. You don't want that gang violence. And by seemingly, the politically expedient thing, we're going to let everybody in, you are allowing violence in your cities. You are allowing them in your streets. And you have to take a stand against that because, quite honestly, that's what people want. You want to have a good city, you want to have a safe city that people want to move in, enforce your laws, work with local law enforcement, and have those kind of very strong bonds with federal law enforcement.
Representative Steele, your district is about 90 miles north of the border, and I'm presuming that when you were a county supervisor, you grappled with this issue as well. What do you hear in Orange County about your citizens' concerns about illegal immigration and what may be coming under this new administration?
You know what, everything's public safety comes first because California a few years ago, they announced that it's a sanctuary state. Orange County is the first one came out against sanctuary state because, you know what, all these criminals, we're talking about criminal illegal aliens, most of those people, 66% of them are committing another crime within 3 years period, and then they're gonna go back to the jail. So we really have to watch out those people who are in jail and who goes to, as you know, that San Diego is south of Orange County, so we are very close to the border. And people are very much worried about the safety. That's a very important issue. And second thing is, I think, we really have to do the immigration reform because, we are not really do the background check. These people they standing on the line and then they try to just come into this country. But you really have to looking at those people who try to come in legally, about over 400 million people waiting outside. I'm a first-generation Korean American. I was born in Korea, raised in Japan. So I speak English as my third language, but let me make sure that I came here legally and I love this country. So background check is the most important part that, anybody who wants to come in, first of all, it has to be legally. Second, when they want to coming in, and you really have to do the background check that they love America or not. And you really do the, immigration reform to make sure that we are bringing in, the right people to the United States.
Thank you for that. So we only have about 5 minutes together remaining. And so I'd like to bring up a topic that was mentioned by one of our veterans and start with them. The Trump administration in the last few years has made tremendous progress in dealing with the People's Republic of China, the Chinese Communist Party, the issue of our supply chains, being able to make critical parts both for consumer and, importantly, defense articles here in the U.S. How do you see that progress either continuing or stalling or, worse yet, reversing under this new administration? And we'll start with the U.S. Air Force.
Well, thank you for that. This is one of the most important topics. We have to keep our eye on the ball. The Communist Party of China is a threat. They are an existential threat. 3 years ago, when the National Defense Strategy was correctly written and assessed by the Trump administration, we refocused our efforts away from the Middle East and towards China, which is that existential threat, the near-peer great power competitor. And we have to keep our eye on the ball here. When we look at the cabinet picks, ranging from Secretary of State to Secretary of Defense to any number, it's very, very important that we ask the right questions. Are you focused on what China can do as an existential threat to our economy, to our defense, and around the world? And that's something that I know there is a large group of people that are going to be asking those questions and trying to keep us focused on it, because it is a threat to this country.
Representative Gonzales, as a Navy cryptologist, you spent time in combat areas in both Afghanistan and Iraq, and yet this is fundamentally a different threat, isn't it? How do you see this concern about the rise of the People's Republic of China?
Yeah, there's no doubt in my mind that China is the greatest external threat to the United States, because they have their hands in absolutely every industry, right? And they don't play fair. You know, they are trying to stack the deck. I believe if there's a level playing field, Americans are going to win that argument every single time. That's part of what we have to do, is ensure a level playing field happens. From a cyber standpoint, they are absolutely attacking our infrastructures. They're absolutely utilizing espionage to further their gains. And that's an area that Congress in particular, really needs to get strong and help these industries protect against this rising Chinese threat that is not going away anytime soon. And the way we do it is what the Trump administration started off by holding China accountable. It's on the U.S. Congress to continue moving that ball down the field.
Thank you for that. Representative Steele, you mentioned that you were born in South Korea, and we just heard from the North Korean dictator, Kim Jong-un, that the U.S. remains the #1 threat or the #1 enemy for North Korea. Do you have any thoughts about where the Biden administration might go wrong or right regarding policies with North Korea?
You know what, North Korea and China, it's all the same thing. They are the threats. It was really interesting when I was running during the campaigning, my opponent said that, no, I'm related to China and I had a very shady husband. The problem is, you know what, I have an accent doesn't mean that, you know, I speak Chinese. I don't even speak Chinese. But North Korea is the most dangerous country, that young punk who is running right now, and he doesn't even know that how to run except the dictatorship. My both parents fled from North Korea. They know how this dictatorship works. And China, I think under the Trump administration, they did a great job against China, sanctions. And right now that, all these new members for 117th Congress, we really have to watch out what Biden is going to do. That's our job.
Yeah.
Representative Van Duyne, we only have a short time here, but you represent an area with a lot of commerce, including multinational corporations. Are you getting much pushback or concern about from firms that would, presume or want to go back to the status quo regarding the People's Republic of China?
We're actually hearing much different. They're looking at intellectual property being stolen. They're looking at us being in the middle of a cyber war right now with China, not knowing what that means. They're also looking at them. Chinese businesses or the Chinese government is constantly undermining American businesses. They are selling things at less than the cost of the raw materials. Our steel industry, our manufacturing industries are suffering as a specific result, as a direct result of China. So the Trump administration, through its Jobs Act, had really started to even up the score and make it more competitive. We need to look at critical infrastructure as including manufacturing jobs. If we've learned nothing over the last 9 months during this pandemic, is that when we need things like PPEs, when we need things like pharmaceuticals, right now we are reliant on these hostile foreign dictatorships, these nations. We have to bring that back to the U.S. That has to be a primary concern. It is definitely a matter of national security. And under Biden, where we have seen a very much Chinese apologist, we can't allow that. It undermines our military, it undermines our businesses, and it undermines, quite honestly, America.
Well, Ladies and gentlemen, both here and viewing on the live stream, thank you for your time and for your attention to these 4 fabulous freshmen. We have Representative Steele out of California, Representative Van Duyne, Representative Gonzales, and Representative Pfluger. Let's hear it for the freshmen.
One logistical thing you'll want to hear. It's true. So we found some keys. And if you're missing some keys to a Nissan, is that right? Okay. You can tell us the model I just told you to make. They'll be at the registration desk. Is that right, Clint? Oh, no, over here. Go right down there. Okay. Second thing is 60 seconds. On Wednesday, we started, and I knew that we were going to leave more optimistic, but I've been listening to many of you, maybe most of you, for several weeks, that all is lost. And you want to leave with something to work on. And I would encourage us to turn to our founding fathers. I turn to Reagan all the time. I spent a lot of time this week watching Ronald Reagan speeches because of his optimism. I turn to Scripture, as most of you do, and was praying this morning about Isaiah 40:31, where the Lord will renew our strength like eagle's wings, and we will soar, now to paraphrase, to heights unknown. The Texas Public Policy Foundation feels the discouragement that you have. We share it, actually. And yet, by virtue of your being here, those of you who've joined virtually as well, we know that although the path ahead is narrow, it's the right path because it is narrow. And I can guarantee you one thing. We're going to win some battles. We're going to lose some battles, but we're mostly going to win because we're going to charge the hill, and when we get to the top, we're planting the Texas flag there, and you're going to be with us, and next year when we meet here in this same spot, we're going to be smiling about what we accomplished the previous 12 months. May God bless you and God bless America. Take care.